day, students. This is Mrs. Doulton, and we're about to take a journey with little T and Buddy. And today we will be starting chapter 3. But let's first review the notes for chapter 1. These are the characters. You have the dog, Grandpa T, little T, Daddy, who's known as T Jr., Mama, little T's sister, her name is Tanya, the baby brother, baby Terrell, and of course, Tomato Man. Little T's family, they were driving to church. Daddy hit a dog. Little T began to connect with the dog, and he offers to walk to church so that the dog can be taken to the church in the already overcrowded car. And then Tomato Man wisely asks little T what he's going to name the dog. So maybe Tomato Man knew something. Maybe he was able to predict that little T might eventually own this dog. We have some conflict. Mama wants a bigger car, but Daddy says they don't have the money. And little T wanted to walk to church, and Mama said no. Let's go to chapter 2 notes. 2 characters were introduced, Jamila and her aunt. And unfortunately, in this chapter, Jamila, who's little T's good friend, has to move to Chicago because her aunt got a better job there. And Jamila was the one who drew a picture of a dog for little T, because little T always wanted a dog. And Jamila is really, really good at drawing. So also in this chapter, little T makes his first plan. He makes a quick prayer to keep the dog. Grandpa T tells the church members about quote unquote Buddy, and the people donate money so that the dog can go to the veterinarian. And little T is hoping that maybe God's plan is the same as his. His parents still say no to him owning or having a dog. And they don't really have the money to care for a dog or to pay the vet bills. So the resolution to this conflict is that the preacher takes up a collection in the church and enough money is collected to bring Buddy to a veterinarian. So that's how chapter 2 ends. And we're going to find out more about what's happening with the dog at the vet and how little T is feeling about this as he returns to school in chapter 3. Buddy by M.H. Herlong, chapter 3. After church, Mr. Nelson carries the dog off in his truck. But just before he drives away, I get a chance to whisper in that dog's ear not to worry, because I got a plan. Of course, I don't tell anybody else about my plan. I just lay in bed that night while Tanya's singing herself to sleep and cross my fingers and try to figure out what to do next. In the morning, I head off to school as usual. I get tired of going to school, especially toward the end of the year. They got the Jazz Fest going on out at the racetrack. They got the flowers blooming all over the yards. They got that breeze coming straight off the river and drifting all over the house when we open up the windows. You can hear the ships blowing their horns and the birds singing in the trees. To tell the truth, that just ain't the time to be sitting in a little bitty desk. That's the time to be outside. We're all sitting there after lunch trying to pay attention, and it ain't working. That boy Rusty, 2 seats over, is falling asleep. His eyes are half shut, and his mouth is drooping open. Somebody, accidentally on purpose, drops a book. Everybody jumps, and the girls scream. Finally, the teacher says, "Okay, enough of that," and starts to hand out paper to draw on. I feel like making an airplane and flying it straight out the window with me on it. But I don't do that. I wait. Then he says, "This is free drawing time. Draw something you love." And I think, if it's free, why do we have to draw something we love? Why can't we draw something we hate? But I don't say that. I pick up my pencil and I get ready to draw. But I've got some problems. The first problem is I ain't a good drawer. Jamila was a good drawer, but she's gone. If she were here, she would get me started on whatever it is I'm going to draw, which is the second problem. What am I going to draw? J-Boy, okay, now he's a new character. J-Boy is sitting next to me like always. He's too old for this class, but here he is anyway. "What are you going to draw?" I whisper. "I ain't drawing nothing," he says. "You're a lazy fool," I say. He shrugs up his shoulders. "I'm going to draw a dog," I say. "So you love dogs?" "I love my dog." "You ain't got a dog." "I'm going to get one." "How?" "I got a plan." "Who's the fool now?" he says, and puts his head down on his desk. That afternoon, we go visit the dog at the vet's, but the vet won't let us see him. He says the dog is pretty bad off. He's getting him ready for surgery. He says that dog's leg is broke so bad he can't save it. He says he's got to cut it off. Tanya's sitting there with her eyes all big and round, and when he says, "Cut it off," tears swell up like an overflowing gutter and come rolling all down her cheeks. Mama looks at her and says, "Don't take on now. It's for the best." When we get home, Grandpa T's sitting in the front room with the baby riding up and down on his knee and the TV going. Mama says, "I told you he needed a nap." And Grandpa T says, "He ain't sleepy." Mama snatches up the baby and stomps off up the stairs. Grandpa T looks at Daddy and says, "What's wrong with that woman?" Daddy says, "It's the dog. He's got to have his leg cut off." And Grandpa T says, "Whoo-hee," and shakes his head. How is a dog going to manage with only 3 legs? What do you think, students? A 3-legged dog. I sit down and open my book bag. I pull out my picture. I'm looking at it and looking at it. I think I did a pretty good job, even if I did do it all by myself. It don't look alive, but anybody can see it's a dog. There's only one thing wrong with it. It's got 4 legs. You see, that day in school, little T did draw a picture of a dog, but it's got 4 legs. He didn't know at that point in school that this dog was going to have a leg amputated. We go back 2 days later, and that big old dog is laying in a wire cage with a big blue plastic cone around his neck, his half leg all wrapped up in bandages, and his ribs still looking like a piece of black corduroy cloth laid over a frame. When we walk in, he lifts up his head and cocks it to one side, like he's thinking to himself, "I've seen that boy before." "What's that blue thing around his neck?" I say. "It's a collar," the doctor says, "to keep him from worrying his wound." Why would he want to do that? He's a dog. That's what dogs do. Why is he all penned up? To keep him resting, the doctor says. just for a day or two. Daddy's standing in the door watching us. What happens then? He asks. Then he needs a home, the doctor says. He ain't a little dog, Daddy says. He needs a home with a big yard. We don't have too many of those in the city, the doctor says. He'll have to make do with something else. We're all making do, Daddy says. He heaves a sigh. And I know he's thinking about the car that's making a funny noise. And that stack of letters I saw by the telephone, and the lady at school who said I need glasses if I'm going to do my best next year. So little T wants the dog, okay? And Daddy's thinking about, they have a car that's making a noise. They mean, he may need to use whatever money they have to buy a car. Daddy's thinking of the stack of letters near the telephone. That's referring to bills that need to get paid. And he's thinking of the fact that little T is going to need glasses. Okay? So the last thing on Daddy's mind is to care for a dog or to pay for a dog. I'm standing there beside the cage. That dog pokes his nose at the wires and starts whining. I reach through and rub his head real soft. He quiets right down and closes his eyes. Is he ever going to get well? I say. The doctor nods. He's weak because he's old and he hasn't been eating right. But once he stands up and starts getting around, he'll be okay. How is he going to manage with only 3 legs? He'll be fine. He just needs somebody to look after him while he heals and to love him when he's well. And to feed him, Daddy says, and take him on walks and clean up his business. That's true, the doctor says. That's money, Daddy says. Come on, son, we've got to go. When I take my hand off the dog, his eyes pop open and he lifts up his head. He's watching us the whole way down the hall. And when I raise my hand to wave goodbye, I swear I see his tail go thump again. So this is just an example of the type of bonding that's going on between little T and this dog. There are many moments when they're just connecting. That night, Grandpa T is sitting on the porch drinking a beer, and when I finish up my homework, I go out and I sit down beside him. That dog's getting better, I say. The vet says he's going to be able to get around on 3 legs just fine. And Grandpa T don't say nothing. The street light flips on and starts buzzing. He's going to need a home soon. Somebody's got to look after him while he heals. Somebody's got to help him learn to walk again. Got to take care of him extra good because he's a special dog. Grandpa T takes another sip. I want a dog, I say. A real dog, not just a picture. Grandpa T sets down the can and looks out at the street. It's pretty dark, so there ain't much for him to see. I want a dog, I say again. But Daddy says a dog costs too much to feed. What about a chicken? Grandpa T says. I had a chicken once. When the new ones hatched, my mama pointed and said, You want a pet? That one's yours. I named it Henny Penny, and I raised it up from a ball of yellow fluff. I talked to it. It clucked back. It used to scratch around the back steps. It came wobbling out when I called. Grandpa T takes another sip and looks down at me. So, what do you say to a chicken? I don't want a chicken. I want a dog. I want that dog. Grandpa T sets down the can and shakes his head. That ain't a little dog. He eats a lot. I'll sell my Game Boy. What? Little T is willing to sell the one thing that he owns so that he can have money to take care of a dog? Grandpa T picks up the can and takes a long drink. I've already talked to J-Boy down the street, I say. Is he that big boy who used to come sniffing around when Jamila was staying here after school? Yeah, I guess so. You still play with him sometimes? We don't play, I say. We just pass the time. Grandpa T looks at me and then he nods. That's what I meant, he says. J-Boy says he'll buy it. He says he's got the money already. He says he'll buy all the games too. You would really do that, Grandpa T says. He's shaking the beer can. It's empty. You would sell that Game Boy? I take a deep breath. I already did it. I reach in my pocket and I pull out money. A lot of money. Today, I say, in school, we're sitting there looking at my hand, all stuffed full of money. I want a dog, I say. I want that dog. Grandpa T stands up. Way up high in the trees, the frogs are screaming. Across the street, the ladies' air conditioner comes roaring on. I plan on naming him Buddy, I say, because that's what he'll be, my buddy. I shove the money back in my pocket. I look up and there's Grandpa T looking down at me in the dark evening. Behind him is the big old sky all full of stars. I cross my fingers. I'll go talk to your daddy, Grandpa T says, and eases on inside. So here we have it. Little T sells his Game Boy and his games. He's got some money. He talks to Grandpa T, who we've learned from previous chapters kind of is the one in the family that makes the final decision. And Grandpa T is kind of like Little T's advocate. He's going to speak up for Little T, and he's going to go speak to Daddy, T Jr. So let's look at chapter 3 notes. We have a new character, J-Boy, and he's in Little T's class, and he's too old to be in Little T's class. So maybe J-Boy was left back, or maybe he got in trouble in school and had to repeat a year or two. And let's look at the plot. Little T is at school and he cannot get Buddy off of his mind. Buddy had surgery and is recovering at the vet's office. Little T tells his daddy and Grandpa T that he wants Buddy. Grandpa T carefully listens to Little T. And Little T makes another plan. He sells his Game Boy. And an important quote in this chapter is listed here. I plan on naming him Buddy, I say, because that's what he'll be, my buddy. And the stop and jot question you'll answer, you'll open up the Google form and answer it. In chapter 2, Little T decides to make a plan to get the dog. Remember, he looks up to the sky and he utters a quick prayer. In chapter 3, Little T tells J-Boy that he has a plan right? And he sells his Game Boy. This is for you to answer. How can creating a plan help you to achieve the goals you have for your life? Okay, and that's it. And I will see you guys for chapter 4. What? It's not here.